Hello there, welcome to Genesis Models. Welcome to the 26th Genesis Models live session. So I'm playing Cameraman. In this session, we're going to be moving along with the building of our A-4M Skyhawk. So we're probably going to be doing sanding, filling, scribing, all that kind of stuff that you need to do with modeling. A couple of little updates, just to sort of let you know. The FA18 is coming along. Hopefully, as you can see, we are all nicely deckled up. That's in step-by-step format on the Genesis Models website. If you want to go check that out, we've started the Tempest as well. Part one of this is up. I have started the Star Trek step by step as well. Episode one isn't up yet, but it will be up next week. And I have potentially got two surprises coming along. Probably get one of them in before the end of the month, and probably one next month. Two nice sort of surprises, sort of exclusives as well from the manufacturers themselves. So stay tuned for that. Also, if you don't already know, me and the wife, we are going doing a charity walk up the top of Snowdon, and this is all for charity tourettesaction.co.uk. Really good charity for kids with Tourette's and adults. It's a really sort of hard thing to deal with. As you may already know, my daughter kind of suffers from it, and we just want to sort of raise a bunch of money for that whole charity. If you are interested, Genesis Models website, on the news section, sort of basically at the top, you'll see a little bit of a write-up and a link to go to a page where you can basically sponsor us to walk up Snowdon. So any help would be appreciated on that. We are getting close to £500, so very good, generous donations so far. So let's jump into the A4M. Let's just get the camera angle right. There we go. So last week we finished the cockpit. We brought the fuselage halves together. As you can see, I've still got the pegs off. We could have took them off ages and ages ago, but this should be all nice, strong and glued together. I just want to jump into the wing section. So getting out Tamiya extra thin cement. This is the quick setting one, by the way, which I do think is the better one, in all honesty, if you can get your hands on it. They do their sort of original one, just as good really. All it is just the same sort of thing. It just dries, it just sets quicker, just what it says on the tin. So let's get this together. It's a pretty sort of nice fit, hopefully, as you can see, but you do want to sort of check over and just make sure that everything is pressing down. You can sort of see maybe a bit of a gap there. Just make sure that's sort of pressing down, looking good. Make sure there's no sort of ejector pin marks pushing up the plastic, and then we can just start to throw some pegs in here just to hold it down. Right, that'll probably do for now. Make sure we got no steps. Right, make sure it's nicely lined up, and then we can simply get a bit of the old Tamiya extra thin cement and just run it along. Let that capillary action just nicely get in there. Right, now we are coming to a little bit just here. I'm going to press down with my finger just here, right, just to close that gap up. And when I've done that, I'm going to squeeze another peg in. Here we go. Let's squeeze another peg just in there. But then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove this peg just so as I can like get on this join line just there, and then quickly bring the peg back in. What you also might want to sort of keep in mind is it is kind of, it can be quite common where if you're holding the piece like this and you're put some Tamiya thin cement down. If you get a bit of a blob and it runs down, right, your thumb is like right there, it's going to get under your thumb and you're going to have this sort of nasty thumbprint. So it is kind of a good idea to go with gravity, and sort of, if it does run down, it's actually going to run down where the join line is, so no harm done. Let's just quickly again remove that peg, and then we're just gonna quickly run down there and then reapply our peg just there. All right, so let's just now just finish this off along here. I just want to run this around and then we'll move along with the fuselage. I just want to check this is all good. Maybe bring along another peg just ready. I'm just going to run some glue along here. These aren't normally the best fits I like it to be totally too hard, but we're actually running along here, which sometimes doesn't look quite right if you ask me. Right, so we may be filling in and sort of rescribing this area, because if you do sort of look at it, you can kind of see, you know, there is sort of like a big gap there, which you could almost say, okay, there's a recessed panel line where the flaps and ailerons and all that kind of stuff are, but I don't know, it just looks a little bit out of place, a little bit out of scale. So I do tend to sort of fill them in, maybe rescribe them. I do like it when it's just full one half and actually the joins along this leading edge, but it's one of those models. So again, quick sort of recap last week, just sort of gluing these pieces together, and I'll glue this one on later off camera. As always, you know, if you want to sort of get in on the chat, any kind of comments are always welcome. Any questions you want answered, any sort of feedback, you know, it's all welcome in there, even just saying hello. So what we're going to do now is work on some sanding. I'm actually going to pick probably a bit of a complicated area just here, because excuse me, what we've got is, if we look, our recessed panel lines here, we've got a circle. Now circles are sometimes a bit of a pain in the butt to sort of do, so I'm going to show you how to do that. And we've got recessed panel lines here along with some rivets also. So to get started, right, let's sort of sand this. Well, first off, actually, whenever sort of you've got one of these, let's get the camera. Whenever you've joined this up, it's a good idea just to sort of look around and just see, you know, have we got any gaps? Has the glue not quite closed any areas? You know, so here we go. I've just noticed one just right here. I don't know if you can just see that little tiny little hole there. Nothing sort of major, but still something to take care of. I did notice also that just here we do have a step, right? You probably can't see it well on camera, but that's basically where, you know, sadly I've glued it together and it's just not quite lined up. It's probably because of all that lead in there. It's probably maybe sort of misaligned it a little bit. So we're gonna have to really sort of sand at this area a fair bit. So just to sort of fill in a little gap like that, probably actually a good one is Vallejo plastic putty. Really good putty to get your hands on, because it's such a small one. We've got this nice needle sort of nose applicator. We can basically put it right on top and we just basically squeeze and try and virtually inject that putty right into the hole, right? So we can leave that to dry and we can sand away at that later. No big deal on that. So all in all, you know, filling isn't a big deal on this one. So come to the front. Let's get out a couple of sanding sticks. Now sanding sticks, There's all sorts of types of sanding sticks we can get our hands on. I do go for the Flurry Model brand. You can get them any online store, pretty much they all sort of sell them, but there are different manufacturers out there, all sorts of different types and sizes. If I just get a couple out for you so you can just sort of see. One second. Skinny sticks are a good one to get your hands on. Hello there from Portugal as well. First off, we've got our sort of bigger sanding sticks. We've got these flat ones, pretty sort of standard in a way. You could probably, you can get sort of nail file versions and stuff, but we basically got a couple of these different grits. We've got sort of like coarse, medium, fine, and really sort of fine. Then we move into stuff like the foamy stuff. Now the foamy stuff's good because normally, and in this case we're going to be doing here, we do have a curvature. So this is where the foam ones come in good, because it will sort of go with the curvature. If we came in with flat sanding sticks, we'll sand away at this, and then what we'll have is this little sort of flat top, and it's just going to look horrid. So foam ones are good for these situations here. We then do have like polishing ones, but we don't need to deal with that tonight. Then we've got skinny sticks. Skinny sticks are really good because they get into all different places really well, which, again, we have the flat top versions of different grits, and then we also have our foamy ones as well, nice and fine also. And then we've got this sort of almost medium grit with a sort of a polishing one on the opposite side. Again, it's probably, they are actually fairly cheap. It's a couple of quid, and you do get a fair few sanding sticks in each one. So first off, this isn't so bad. You don't have to come in with the really coarse stuff. This is a pretty good join line here, so we could just nicely sand away with a fine spongy sanding stick. We don't need sort of the skinny sticks at the moment really, because it's a nice easy access. Right, and we can just sand away at that. Right, and we don't want to go too far. We only want to go as far as we need to take it to get it looking seamless. That's what this is all about. So I'm feeling that. Maybe a little bit more at the top. Right, and hopefully we should be good. I'm just using my nail just to kind of feel if we got any steps in there. Is my nail sort of digging into like a hole or anything like that? And in this case, I'm not feeling anything. Now the one thing is, we did have this circular bit just here. I don't know how well you can see it. Now I do find that to go off and try and take the original, say, recessed circle and try and fix it back to normal is a lot harder than actually going off and just making a completely new one. So what I want to do is I do want to sand away at this area a bit and literally completely remove that recessed panel line in the shape of a circle. Right, because once it's gone, it just means I am nice, free and easy to just put in a whole brand spanking new one. Right, now that was a nice fine sanding stick, and I didn't have to go off get coarse sanding sticks. Don't even need to have to polish this. That is all good. One sanding stick, the job's done. Now on this side, because we've got this big step, we could probably come in with something a bit more coarse. So this is like a medium to fine coarseness. Actually, this is a bit of a flat area, so we don't have to use the whole spongy stuff here. We could probably come along with a medium grit and just sand away at that, and then sort of work our way down the grits, probably this one next, and then a finer one, finish it off. But I'll do that off camera because we are live and I want to move things along. So now that's all sanded, that should all be seamless. We're not going to know until it's fully painted, but let's jump into a little bit of scribing. So I'll just get my tools out for that. Welcome to all you guys who are coming into the chat. People from New England, USA, from the UK. We got Wendy. Excuse me. What else we got? How does plastic putty compare to Tamiya's putty from Retro Starship? Do you know what? Have I even got any Tamiya plastic putty? Do you know what? I haven't. I've got loads of different brands of plastic putties and stuff, but it's the one brand I don't have, and people do keep on mentioning it. I'm not sure what it's like. I think Tamiya plastic putty is a little bit, I think, like the green stuff. When it comes to plastic putties, there's different types. I mean, you got Plasto. This is sort of like, it almost seems like it's a mixture of like a sort of a Tamiya Thin cement glue and sort of like a plaster, and it kind of melts the plastic at the same time as filling it. Which can be useful in different areas. Green putty, you know, this is kind of like a thicker, coarser putty. For stuff like this, I'd go off and go, okay, if I've got a big sort of gap and it needs filling, you know, because it's like a bit thicker and coarser, it's going to fill those big gaps even better. And then for those sort of smaller sort of gaps which are really sort of fine, we've got the good old Mr. Surfacer stuff here. This is like a brush on sort of filler, and it gets rid of those sort of micro kind of fillers. Combining it with green putty is really good, because the green putty will fill the gap, a big gap up nicely, and then you can paint on top of that the Mr. Surfacer to get it nicely finely filled, and then you sand it away. Good combo there. The Vallejo plastic putty, I don't really normally use it for filling, but that was just a small little hole and it could inject in there. It was good. I normally use the Vallejo plastic putty later on. So scribing tools, let's get these out while I read some more. We've got Paul there. He started using the Vallejo plastic putty and he's loving it. I'm glad you do, because I do myself. Really nice product that is. I'm just getting out a couple of sort of scribing tools just here. What we've got is we've got these sort of templates, right? These are quite cool. A couple of quid, any online shop, you can get them in like sets of 3 and stuff. And what it is, I mean, for one, it's a ruler, which I'm just going to quickly sort of show you now. Actually, here we go. For a ruler type thing, I mean, we've got a recessed panel line just running along here. Right, and what we can do is, if we get our P cutter, we sort of, where this recessed panel line starts, right, we can sort of butt up our ruler. And this is sort of like the tricky part. The tricky part is actually, you know, trying to hold this on and keeping it nice and steady. We put our P cutter actually in a recessed panel line. We butt up the template, right, and then we just run it across where the join line is, right, very slowly, right, and it's just all about, you may as well take about 20 passes rather than taking one, and slowly, you know, cutting away that plastic just a bit. Now I'm also holding the P cutter like this. I find this a very steady way of holding it. So, you know, I've got my 3 fingers here actually on the model, and then I'm sort of holding it a bit like a pencil, and then as I'm doing it, I'm rotating the model, right? I'm not actually sort of moving the P cutter. You want to sort of rotate the model this way. Basically, a P cutter is holding a very steady, straight, sort of fixed position, and it's the model that's moving. right? And that way we should get a nice sort of straight line, and that's what these templates are good for, is just getting that nice sort of straight line just on there. Also, as you probably can see, there's all these different shapes, which then brings us to our circle just here. So what we can do is sort of pick what looks like, you know, around about the right size that we may have had before, right? And again, this is like the tricky part. It's sort of, you know, being able to hold it and hold it firmly in place, right? And then being able to sort of come along and then actually scribe in there. I'm trying to get it centered as possible, right? These do sort of bend a bit as well, which is rather cool. But I just want to get this nice and centered, right? Then what I've got is a little hand drill, right, with a sewing needle in there. And what I'm going to do is very lightly, I'm just going to go around in circles using this template. I'm just going to very slowly go around with it, right? But it's you just got to be very slow and sort of light, do lots of passes. And the last thing you want to do is maybe dig down too hard and maybe end up moving the template, and then you've got to sort of, you're in this horrible situation if you've just started, you know, scribing. You've got to then sort of adjust the template again back into the right position. So very carefully, very slowly, be patient, take your time. Right, and then it takes a little bit of skill to kind of adjust, sort of get the right depth, right? You sort of want to be looking at the rest of the model and sort of seeing, you know, what are, you know, the recesses like on the rest of the model. I mean, you don't want to sort of dig down so deep that, oh, you know, this recess panel line looks way deeper than the rest of the model, because then it'll just look a little bit out of place, or too wide or something like that. So now that has had that nicely rescribed back in there, and I'm just sort of feeling it, making sure there's no sort of lumpy bits. Now doing it like that, I mean, you could sort of feel it. If you feel after doing that, you could sort of feel that there's sort of like raised bits and stuff on there. So very carefully with, do you know what I always like to keep? And this is, you know, a nice fine sanding stick, but if you get an old one like this one here, which as you can see has been used and abused, right, always keep hold of these, because what tends to happen is an old one just gets finer and finer and finer. The more you use it, the finer it sort of starts to get. So this is like really nice and fine. So this is nice and good, just to sort of just lightly sand at our little circle that we've just scribed in here. And you can probably see the sanding dust just in there. And I'm just feeling that now, and I can't feel any sort of raised bits. Right, and then if I just get out nice little tool as well, an old toothbrush, grab one of them, maybe dip it into a little bit of water that's just off camera, and then what we can do is just brush out any sort of sanding dust that's just got into that recessed panel line we've just done. Right, maybe dry it off with a kitchen paper towel. Right, and that isn't looking too bad at all. Nicely back in there. As I say, it just seems a lot easier just to obliterate the old one and put a new one in, because if we kept the old one, it'd be like, okay, which one is, you know, a close size match? And if you can just you know, slightly one of these circles isn't quite the same size as the old one. It just kind of messes it up. So it's best just to start again, in my opinion, just there. Just having a quick look at any questions. Quantum Plastic is asking how to control the shrinking of the putty. That's a good question, actually. Shrinkage can be a bit of a problem. We've just done a little bit of filling just at the back here. I mean, that's probably dry enough to give that a sand. Maybe let's bring you in a little bit closer. It's normally where you're doing some big time filling, right? Just give that a quick sand. Right, this one here, it's a little tiny sort of hole, and as you can see, the filler's still in there, and that should be rather nice. But the problem is what can potentially happen is leave that for 24 hours. When it comes to anything like paint or putty, filler, what happens is you know, you need to leave it probably a certain amount of time for it to cure. I mean, that felt dry and I sanded it away dry, but curing is a different thing. That is where it's like dry to the bone, completely and utterly down to the core of it. It's totally and utterly dry, and when that happens, it shrinks. It can shrink a bit. Something as small as that probably will not be noticeable, but if you've got something like a big gap, that shrinkage can really sort of shrink down. So I could basically, if I did a big gap, big load of filler, I could sand it back and it would just feel absolutely perfect. But then tomorrow I could come in and it's totally cured and it's just shrunk just that little bit, just enough to kind of see a little bit of a little dip just in there. Best way to control it is, you know, sadly it's one of these things you gotta be patient. Potentially literally going around and going, right, I need to fill here, I need to fill there. You fill it and then you walk away, and you know, you come back the next day or even a couple of days after, depending on the putty, and let that shrinking process happen before you sand it away. And even then, to sort of sand it away and then maybe put on another filler on top just to make sure, is another way of going about it. Or there is another option to this, and that is to use super glue. I'm going to actually show you that. I'm going to deliberately make a gap because the super glue one is quite cool. All right, now I'm pretty sure this bit gets covered up, so I'm just going to cut into this to make, you know, a gap along that join line. Right, deliberately make one. Let's get a pea cutter on there, maybe. Let's just cut some of it out, make a nice big gap just there. There we go. Just to show you. So as you can see, nice big gap there. Right, the plastic, the super glue technique is rather cool. I think I've got some leftover super glue just here. I might have some in there. Just get out, I like to just get out a pot, an old pot of some sort. Here we go. Or a lid. Cotton wool bud lid's quite cool. Let's pour some super glue just on top of here like so. Which I don't think there's much left in this. I think we've got enough out to fill what we need to fill. Hopefully, fingers crossed. If not, I'll have to get some more out. Right then, oh, I've got the tools all over the place. Right, so for this, I like to come in with, I like to keep a couple of blades. Right, some, you know, I've got another number 3 handle by Swan Morton just here, old blade on there. And what we can do, right, is just sort of, let's scrape up some of this super glue on the end of the blade, right? And then what we do is we actually follow the gap with the blade and the super glue, and what basically happens is you know, the blade's just getting right in there and basically almost kind of injecting it right perfectly where that gap is. Right, nice and easy, nicely neat, and nicely applied to it. And then what we can do, maybe a quick kitchen paper towel, quickly, just one quick wipe across the blade. If you haven't completely cleaned it, we can burn it off with a lighter. Alright, so then that blade's all sort of good to go again. Now we want to let that super glue, you know, properly dry. But the cool thing is about the super glue is that super glue, it is a bit harder to sand this away. I mean, we could add a bit of baby powder in there if you really sort of wanted to. It's a bit hard to sand away, but the great thing about it is there is no shrinkage. Super glue dries so quick, so fast, that whole curing time process is, you know, reduced down to like minutes rather than days. So whatever shrinking is going to happen is going to happen pretty soon. So we can come back to this maybe in like, you know, 5 or 10 minutes, sand it down, and there's going to be no shrinkage. Job's done. There you go. So we'll just leave that for a little bit. I'll have a little quick read of any comments from you guys. Someone's recommended, Conrad, about using acetone against super glue rather than burning your tools. Yeah, one way of doing it if you want to try that one out. Paul is currently working on the Revell 148 scale Super Hornet, and says how much of a nightmare and a serious fit issue it is, and I would totally and utterly agree with you. I've done about 2 or 3 of them, and it's a right royal pain. If I remember correctly, it's right back here. There's like a joint just here, and it is just absolutely dog awful. The air intakes and everything, even just like going around here, absolutely horrible fit issues on it. It is a nasty kit. I mean, it's one of those kits. Oh, you know, it's good in some ways. The surface detail's good on it, but it is, as you say, there's a lot of filling, sanding, scribing on that kit. But hopefully you'll get through it, and I'd love to see it if you want to post it on the Genesis Models forum. Right then, so we could probably do maybe a little bit of what's it? Recess rivets, right, with our little rivet maker just here. Now this rivet maker, I do believe this was from RB Productions. I can't remember how much it was, maybe £5–10. There's different sort of sets you can get. Basically you go off and get like a handle, and then you got these bits of, let's squeeze this off maybe. You got these bits of photo etch. Here it is by RB Productions, as you can see just there. It's kind of like these bits of photo etch, and you sort of stick it in your handle, and you've got this really nice rivet maker, which is rather cool. And you can have different sort of size wheels and stuff, but again, it's sort of like the same sort of process as scribing in a sense. Again, holding it is a really good you know, sort of thing to start with. And what I like to do is sort of getting in close and trying to get you in on camera, but I like to sort of get one of these little teeth that are on here and get that sort of stuck in to a recess rivet that's already on here, and then you sort of just slowly sort of roll this onto the next sort of rivet, and we should have put in some nice little rivet holes just there. Another way of doing it, which sometimes I do if it sort of gets a bit too fine and I want to sort of control it, is I'll even come along with a little hand drill with a sewing needle in there, right, and I'll just manually put each one in. I do tend to like doing it this way in certain situations. This is potentially one of these situations where I haven't got to put a lot in, but I can sort of see on here that these rivets are sort of very close together, and it's only a little bit, and sometimes it's a bit too hard to get in with the rivet maker, right? Plus, this way you do have that control of, because you're pressing it each one down, you can sort of get the right depth and everything a lot sort of easier, which is another way of doing it. Again, if you feel you've a bit of the plastic's been pushed out, because when sort of digging down and the plastic gets pushed out, you can sort of feel those rivets coming out. So again, a very sort of light sanding, right? We don't want to sand away the work we've just done, but if we just sort of sand away that bit of plastic that's been sort of pushed out, right? And again, good old toothbrush with a little bit of water on, just to clean out any sort of sanding dust that's got in there. Another way, right, is to go freehand. Freehand is something that, you know, if you could sort of learn to do, would be a good sort of tool in your skill set, where again, you know, what we're going to do is start off the recessed panel line, right, and slowly sort of rotate the model. Now in this particular one, we're okay, right, because, you know, we didn't have to do a lot of sanding, and because we didn't have to do a lot of sanding, basically this recessed panel line is shallow. It's not been completely obliterated, it's just nice and shallow, right? And the same with these two just here, they've only just gone shallow, right? So we ain't got to worry about it. So again, we're holding that P-cutter nice and steady, and then we're rotating the model. Again, rotate the model, keep that P-cutter nice and steady. Right, so looking at that, we are looking pretty sort of good, I think. Now looking at this circle one, right, because we're using a sewing needle, and the problem is with these circle ones is a P-cutter digs in and you might see like bits of plastic being scraped out and it removes the plastic. With a sewing needle, it doesn't tend to do that job that well. I don't know if you can see it, but there's a bit of like white stuff in there, and that's just like a bit of the plastic that hasn't quite been sort of scraped out. So very carefully I'm sort of coming back in just to remove that, right? And I could sort of do this freehand because, you know, the shape's been made, because it's a recess, and if you're careful, slow and steady, well, you shouldn't slip out. Just blow that, and then I'm just going to, again, you know, because we're sort of like scraping up the plastic, it's going to feel a little bit rough. We give it a light bit of a sanding, and again we can sort of clean that out, get rid of that water. So I know rescribing is a bit of a process and a timely thing, but it can be kind of therapeutic. Right, so hopefully that's all going to look good now. Now really, when it comes to any kind of filling, sanding, scribing, we can look at this and sort of go and feel it, and it might seem all good, but we're not really going to know how good it is or how bad it is until we actually get a bit of paint actually down. So just going to get out a bit of black paint, any black paint really. Right, give it a shake. I'll slap a bit of this out. Right, getting out a paintbrush, any old paintbrush would do. Right, maybe a bit of water just off camera, just to thin it down a little bit, so it's not too thick. And what we can do is just paint where we've actually done some work. And what this should do is indicate to us how good or how bad everything is. And we should be able to see it even on camera a lot easier what's going on. So we just need to let that dry a little bit. Just clean our paintbrush off. Mark's asking about the rescribing templates. Depends where you are in the world, but I mean, pretty much most online stores will do these kind of things. I know I was just shopping on Scale Model Shop like the other day. They've got all these kind of stuff. Hanance, I think that's .co.uk or .com. They've got all the tools are pretty much on there. I think it's what was it now? Something Brothers in the US or something. All sorts of sort of online stores, or simply like just googling scribing template should hopefully bring you those results. We've got another question here about the P cutter. Is the Tamiya one my preferred one? See, I've sort of grew up on the Tamiya P cutter, and it's sort of like one of these things. I mean, your skill level is kind of almost like you get used to a tool, so it is a nice tool. But then RB Productions also do a rather nice P cutter. This one just here. I do like this one in certain situations. For instance, we could probably remove these now. When this goes on here, somehow, like so, if we have to try and sort of do a recessed panel line right in this 90-degree angle just here, problem is, as you can see, that P cutter can't get right into the corner, whereas this one, okay, it's a little bit harder, you know, that can't quite right get in there, but it can get that bit further in, which gives it those little bit of an advantage of being able to get into those sort of right angles a little bit better. I mean, to be fair, that's quite a nasty angle to get at. We can sort of get at the one there, and then it's sort of quite difficult. Maybe we could probably sort of bring the P cutter down just to get in there. I just like to get this one out if we ever get into awkward places, but really my go-to is the Tamiya one, because I've just always been used to it, and I just find it always just cuts really well and really nice. I've only had to replace the blades about 2 or 3 times as well. They do last a fair bit. Right, so next up, let's move back. Well, actually, this is sort of dried up now, and you can probably see, right, a lot clearer. You can see those panel lines a lot clearer, and you can also see, actually, I mean, we can, I'll just get a little pointer or something, we can see that this was our join line running down here, and as you can see, that sanding has completely removed our join line, so it's gone seamless. But if we move up, you might just be able to see up here where it's a little bit in the corner, we can just see a little bit of a gap going on there. That's just where we've missed sanding that back and get it nice and seamless. So we could see that, we can see our circles looking good, and then what we can do is coming in with our nice fine old used sanding stick, right, we can just lightly sand away, right, this paint, right. So what happens then is we'll get to see any other imperfections, any other problems. Right, so just doing that light bit of a sanding. What this now indicates to us is, as I've just shown you, we've got that gap because we haven't quite sanded up to that corner. Well, because it's a little bit recessed, the paint has stayed in there and the sanding stick hasn't been able to sand away the black paint. So we can see, you know, there's a bit of a problem there. You can see the recessed panel lines, they are looking good. Right, they're in there, the paint stayed in there. We can see that the circle as well, the paint stayed in there. It's so clear. You can even see these sort of light rough scuffs just here. When you sand something, it kind of scratches at the model. And what this basically means is we could probably do with sanding that just a little bit better, just to remove those scuffs. So if we keep on sort of lightly now sanding at this, we should get rid of those light scuffs and just make this even more perfect. And in fact, although I didn't see it when we had the paint on there, you can sort of see a light line going down there. Right, so that's kind of showing that maybe our seam line isn't as seamless. But if we do sort of sand at it until we can't see that black paint, as you cannot see it now, that should be absolutely perfect. And the same goes for the top of here. You know, if we sort of keep sanding at this until there is no black paint in that little corner there, we can get that seamless as well. I'm kind of thinking maybe we're coming with a skinny stick now as well. All right, so I'm going to just keep on targeting this area just here. In fact, I don't know, maybe a bit of filler, because actually that little bit of black paint isn't going away. So where's our Vallejo plastic putty? Where did that go? Somewhere in this mess. 1 second. Or did I put it back? Yep, I'll put it back. So yeah, if we just sort of inject into there now our Vallejo plastic putty, let that dry, and then we will sand that away. Just quickly check any more questions you guys might have. Thanks for that. 1700. Sprue Brothers is the one in the USA. If you want to check out a good online store, they are rather good. Then let's come back to our bit of super glue just here. That should be nice and dry down to the bone. Right, I'm sort of feeling it, and actually it feels like it's actually shrunk a little bit, shrinking. So now basically, because it's done all its shrinking, I'm feeling this, and actually that has shrunk down a bit. So we could do with actually applying a bit more super glue, which is the advantage of using good old super glue. So where's the old, yeah, I wonder if we got a little bit left still on it. Yeah, there we go. So this is the advantage of using super glue. The shrinking just happens so quickly. Right, we don't have to wait days for the whole process to happen. I mean, that process has just happened while we was messing about with other things, and I can feel that it's shrunk. I know you probably can't see it on camera, but it has shrunk. It's sort of gone into that little gap we've done. I could do with some more super glue actually. Let's just wax some out. It's one thing whenever you try and open up some super glue, it's always blocked at the end. Let's just get out a cocktail stick and try and stab this. Although it's quite, there we go. So let's just pour this on our little palette. There we go. Right, let's just quickly clean the end of that before we put the lid back on. Okay, so let's get out our blade again, and let's just precisely get some super glue in there. There we go. And then bit of Vital Bond if you want to speed things up. Give it a shake, and then we just squirt a bit on. Give it a blow. Right, and that normally sort of happens quite instantly. But I was using the thicker super glue. It's still wet. We'll give that a little bit more time to dry, I think. Maybe another squirt. There we go. Any more questions you guys might have? That might be it for tonight. We are sort of coming to the end. I do want to show you this super glue thing, but it does need to be dry. And it needs to be like completely dry because we're going to be sanding at it. And last thing I want is super glue on my sanding sticks. Right, there we go. Hopefully that should be enough now, because you know, it's super glue. It's going to be harder. Coming in with like fine sanding sticks isn't really going to do the job. So what I tend to do is I like to come in with, you know, a coarse sanding stick. But what I'm going to do is it's coarse, right? So I'm just going to lightly sand at it, just enough so you sort of, because it's quite a bit of a bulged out, right? I just want to sand it enough so that we are so we get to the point where we're almost going to start sanding the plastic. Right, at the moment I'm just sanding at the actual super glue still. And just keep on checking I'm not touching the plastic. As soon as I start touching the plastic, I want to stop using the coarse one. Right, the coarse one just speeds things up, right? So I can now turn this over, and on the opposite side we've got a medium grit. Alright, so I can sand away at that. And this is all about following the process of just, you know, we started with coarse, we've gone down to a medium grit. Now we could, I mean, actually we could probably come down to like we've got our sort of fine, almost sort of medium grit on this spongy sanding stick, because we have got a curvature here. So we're almost coming down to a fine sanding stick. And we're just sanding away at that. And I'm just feeling it all the time, and it feels quite good. Right, now I'm happy to go into our fine sanding stick. Right, now it's totally and utterly up to you. I mean, you can come along and just go the whole hog, right, and you can get out one of these polishing ones, right. I mean, actually, if we come back to our fine stroke medium grit one, on the opposite side there is a polisher on there. Right, so we can sort of come in with that just to sort of finish it off. Right, and that now does seem good. Right, and hopefully you can just sort of see. Now it is a bit sort of deceiving because it's super glue and it's basically clear. Right, it kind of gets a little bit deceiving in the sense that you can sort of see through it because it's clear, so you can sort of see into the gap, and you're like, is that actually filled or not? But if you do feel it, you can feel that it's sort of all nicely gone. But as I say, super glue, you don't have to worry about the whole shrinking process. It all happens a lot quicker. And again, we can just go off, we can get out some black paint, paint it on top, make sure that's all gone. If it's not, whack a bit more super glue on it, or whatever filler you prefer. When it comes to fillers, I mean, there is a preference to it, you know, if you prefer it or not, but then at the same time, you know, certain fillers do a certain good job in certain cases. To be honest with you, if this super glue, if there was like a slight little bit of a gap left, I'd probably get out the Mr. Surface stuff, the stuff that you paint on. Let's just pretend there is one actually, just very quickly. Right, this Mr. Surface stuff is quite good. This is the one 1200 grit. It is a little bit, does dry up and mess up your lids, hence why they have these rubber things on there. Right, I do keep a Pacific paintbrush for this. I'll keep my little red one specifically for this, because it is a bit of a messy thing and it does mess up your paintbrushes, so I like to keep one specifically for the job. So I'm just going to paint that on top, right? And you know, if we had some sort of, I kind of like to call them micro sort of gaps, you know, the really sort of tiny stuff that kind of leaves that slight imperfection. I like to use this Mr. Surfacer for that stuff, right? And that should sort of finish all those kind of things off, and then again just give it a light sanding. And that is, I would say, basically it for tonight. So if you do have any questions, get them in quickly before we finish for the night. Next week I'm probably going to sort of build through this, because I've sort of shown you gluing, building, filling, sanding, scribing, all that kind of stuff, and try and sort of, I don't know, find some fit issues maybe, but sort of move it along a bit. So you'll probably see this moved along. Last quick thing, paintbrushes. You don't want to be throwing your paintbrushes out every time you've used Mr. Surfacer, so get out a bit of cellulose thinners, which is basically a lacquer based thinners, right? We can dip our paintbrush into the cellulose thinners, and have I got a tissue? Hold on, let's grab a tissue. Here we go. Grabbing a tissue, we can then sort of clean, it just cleans up absolutely perfectly. Right, I've been using this same brush for Mr. Surfacer fillers for like probably 8 years now, and it's, you know, it's not the best looking paintbrush, but it does the job. Saves using all your nice paintbrushes. So that's all nice and clean by using some cellulose thinners. So let's bring you back to me. Okay then. Checking on some last questions maybe. Couple of comments from one of our members saying about lacquer thinners cleans enamels from airbrushes quite well, which yes, it's true. You know, this cellulose thinners, I always sort of if I get sort of like a bit of a nasty blockage, I'll just throw this in there and it literally kind of cleans anything and everything, to be honest with you. It does break down a lot of different types of paints. Yes, it is very, very potent, very, very smelly. If you are sort of putting in an airbrush, you're potentially going to then be sort of like spraying out the nasty stuff, and it proper reeks. So good ventilation on that. Apart from that, I think that is it for tonight. So yeah, next week we are going to be moving along with this. I'm going to do a bit off camera. I'm not sure where I'll get up to, but we'll have something nice to look at then. Again, we've got the FA18 going on. Tempest has just been started. The Star Trek build is going to be coming next week. We've got our charity walk going up Snowdon for Tourette's action, which would be great if you could get in on that. I've got 2 things that are hopefully going to be coming up, which is going to be a bit of an exclusive of like a new kit being released, and there's another new kit that will potentially turn into a step-by-step, but we'll see about that. So hopefully you'll be staying tuned for all that. Thanks for watching, and hopefully you have enjoyed. So until next time, my name is Bob Waldron, this is Genessis Models, and I hope you've enjoyed.